So now to the latest on the mysterious death of Nolan Wells. For the first time since Wells' body was found, we're hearing from a friend of the 18-year-old who was with him on the day that he died. Tracestin Shepherd, who says that he was with Wells on the 4th of July, but declined to speak on camera because of the threats that he says he's been receiving.
We did no wrong here, and we don't understand how we're getting so much hate behind it. We all cared and loved Nolan, and nobody wanted to see Nolan die. Nobody wanted to see his life be taken so short.
There's a video that's been played on nearly every true crime channel covering this case. A boy's voice screaming on a beach, "Give me my freaking phone." What are you freaking doing? For over a week, that clip has been treated as the last words of an 18-year-old boy before he died. His family's own attorney told the country that voice belongs to Nolan Wells. This week, a young man sat down on national television, looked directly into the camera, and said something that undoes almost everything you think you know about this case. "That's me yelling, not Nolan hymns." And he said it with tears running down his face. Because he says his own friends have been getting death threats over 9 seconds of audio that never happened the way millions of people online decided it did. So if the single most viral piece of evidence in this entire investigation just fell apart live on camera, what does that actually change? And what's left standing once you take it away? I'm going to walk you through exactly what's confirmed, what just got overturned, and what still honestly doesn't add up. Stay with me because the answer is a lot more complicated than either side of this story wants it to be. Nolan Xavier Wells was 18 years old. A wide receiver at Southwest Mississippi Community College, a graduate of Ocean Springs High School, where his own coach later said he was exactly the kind of young man every program hopes to produce, not because of what he said, but because of how he carried himself. His father, Elmore Wonsley, describes him as a silent leader, somebody teammates followed without him ever needing to raise his voice. He was headed back to campus within weeks to get ready for football season. He would have turned 19 the following month. His mother, Christine Wonsley, has described him in a way that sticks with you, a kid who was always the one grabbing a phone at a party, saying, "Hey ma, come on. Take a picture of me," right before bed some nights just to check in. Not a performance for anyone, just who he was. On the night of July 3rd, by his mother's account, he had dinner at home, salmon cooked by his mom, a hug. "And I love you." Then he left to spend the night at a friend's house, getting ready for a 4th of July trip his family had watched him take before with the same friends to the same island. More times than they could count. Nothing about that goodbye felt like anything other than an ordinary night before an ordinary holiday. That's the part that's almost impossible to sit with now because there was no warning. Just a mother saying goodbye to her son the way she always did. If this is your first time watching us cover a case, we go deep, we go accurate, and we don't stop until real answers land. Subscribe now because what happens in the next 90 minutes of this story is the entire reason it made national news. Horn Island sits roughly 8 to 10 miles off the Mississippi coast, part of the Gulf Islands National Seashore. According to the National Park Service's own description, there's no staff out there. No drinking water, no shelter, no cell service. Nothing except sand, pine trees, and on a holiday weekend, a few hundred people who have come out by private boat to treat the water like a shared backyard for the day. The only way in or out is by boat. Once you make that crossing, whatever happens next happens without backup nearby. For this group, none of that felt risky. They'd made this trip before, the same stretch of coastline, the same friends, the same routine. Cross the water, spend the day on the sand, head home once the sun started going down. At around 3:00 p.m. on July 4th, Nolan was seen on the island's northwestern tip. Blue swim trunks, sunglasses. Nobody watching him on that beach in that moment had any reason to think they were looking at the last confirmed sighting of his life. By roughly 4:30, the boat that had carried the group out was heading back. According to accounts given publicly since, including one from Jackson County Chancery Judge Ashley Cole, whose son Warren was on that trip, the boat had developed engine trouble tied to a failing bilge pump. Not dramatic, the kind of small mechanical issue that simply ends a beach day earlier than planned. The group packed up, and by every account given since, Nolan was not among them. 90 minutes. That's the gap between the last confirmed sighting of Nolan Wells and the moment his friends left that island without him. To this day, no single account has fully explained what filled that window. For hours, nobody outside that friend group realized anything was wrong. Christine wasn't tracking a clock, An evening running long on a holiday with friends he trusted wasn't unusual for her son. Nothing about that quiet felt any different from any other summer night in Ocean Springs. Then, close to 11:00 p.m., two things happened almost at once. One of the boys on that boat contacted the United States Coast Guard, reporting Nolan hadn't returned with the group. Separately, a call reached Tracestin, not from Nolan, from one of his friends. She said publicly that she knew something was wrong before a single word was spoken, because Nolan's friends simply don't call her directly. That phone call was the beginning of everything that followed. And the very first thing his father did once he learned what had happened wasn't panic, it was a question. The same question he's been asking publicly ever since. If you want to understand why that question still doesn't have an answer, stick around, because what his parents found once they got their hands on Nolan's actual phone is where this case stops being a missing persons story and starts being something a lot harder to explain. The search that followed pulled in multiple agencies, the Jackson County Sheriff's Office, and volunteer groups including the United Cajun Navy, a Louisiana-based search and rescue nonprofit that regularly assists with cases exactly like this one along the Gulf Coast. On Monday, July 6th, 2 full days after Nolan was last seen, a National Park Service ranger found a body in the water off the island's northwestern shoreline. Jackson County Coroner Bruce Lind told reporters the swimsuit matched what Nolan had last been photographed wearing. The body was later confirmed through dental records to be Nolan Wells. Coroner Lind has been direct about the physical condition of the body. He's told reporters there were no immediately obvious signs of trauma. He's also been direct about something else. The currents around that specific end of Horn Island are known for being strong, and drownings in that stretch of water aren't rare. There have been drownings out in the barrier islands many times over the years, he told CNN. That's a real, documented, mundane explanation. It's also fair and deeply human that a father who searched that same water himself the day before his son's body was found has said he struggles to accept a 2-day gap between looking and finding. An autopsy was performed by the state medical examiner on Tuesday, July 7th. As of this recording, the results, cause of death, manner of death, and a full toxicology report have not been released. Officials have said that process alone can take 2 to 3 weeks. Sheriff John Ledbetter has said publicly more than once that nothing found so far points to a crime. He's also said the investigation remains fully active. Those two statements sitting side by side are exactly why this case has refused to settle into a simple story, and exactly why the family made a decision most grieving parents never have to consider. Before we get into what that decision uncovered, if this case has your attention, hit subscribe now, because the next part is where the family's own investigation collides directly with what officials have said publicly. And it's the part of this story almost nobody's gotten completely right. Here's where this case gets genuinely complicated, and where I want to slow down because most coverage of this has oversimplified it. In the hours after Nolan went missing, Tracestin used Life 360, a location-sharing app already installed on his phone, to try to track him. What she found didn't line up with what she was being told. The app showed the phone already back on land. At the same time, a friend on the phone was telling her Nolan hadn't come back with them. Through a family friend, Tracestin retrieved the phone from one of the boys before it ever reached investigators. Sheriff Ledbetter has confirmed, as recently as this week, that the phone had not yet been formally handed over to law enforcement days into the case. When Tracestin and her sister opened Nolan's Snapchat, both accounts came back empty. No saved photos, no saved videos from that entire day. She said publicly they checked before the 24-hour window closed, the window after which Snapchat content disappears on its own if nobody saved it. If anything had existed by the platform's own mechanics, it should still have been recoverable. It wasn't there. I want to be careful about what that actually proves. It is not confirmed evidence of tampering. Accounts can look empty for boring reasons, nothing posted that day, a sync issue, a new device login. What it is, concretely, is a real documented gap between what an active 18-year-old Snapchat should look like and what his mother found when she opened it. That gap is exactly the kind of thing a proper forensic phone extraction can resolve, and it's why the family is pushing hard to get real access to the account's server-side history. Not just what's visible on a screen. Snapchat itself has responded publicly. A company spokesperson told CBS News their hearts go out to the family and confirmed they're prepared to work directly with investigators. That's a company confirming this is a live, open question, not just a theory floating with nothing behind it. Now here's the part that changed everything this week. Since almost the moment Nolan went missing, a video has circulated online shot from a boat, panning across a crowded stretch of Horn Island's shoreline. Audio picking up what sounds like an argument. Attorney Ben Crump, representing the family, told reporters the voice on that video belongs to Nolan, saying something close to "give me my freaking phone. What are you freaking doing?" and said his team believed it was the last confirmed audio of Nolan alive. Arguing over the exact object that would later turn up wiped clean and in someone else's possession. That claim traveled everywhere. It became the emotional center of this entire case online. On July 13th, Nolan's close friend, Tracestin Shepherd, sat down with ABC News and directly contradicted it. He said the voice on that video is his own, not Nolan's. He said the argument had nothing to do with a phone at all, that it was a moment between him and his girlfriend, and that he was yelling at his friend Javon Williams and a family member, both of whom were physically restraining him on the boat because he wanted off it to keep arguing with her. His exact words, "Nolan wasn't on the island at that point in the video. Shepherd wasn't cold reciting a legal statement, he was in tears." He told ABC News his friends have been receiving threats, that people online are terrified over a video that's been read completely wrong by millions of strangers. In his own words, "I'm not just hurting because of Nolan. I'm also hurting because I call my friends and you can hear it in their voice that they're terrified of what these people will do to them. Sit with what that actually means." A named eyewitness on camera under his own name directly contradicting a claim made publicly by the family's own attorney. That doesn't clear anyone. It doesn't prove Nolan's death was simple, and it doesn't prove the family's broader concerns are wrong. What it does is remove, or at minimum seriously complicate, what had become the single most shared piece of evidence in this entire story. And it's a correction almost no other coverage of this case has actually centered. So if that video isn't what it was believed to be, what's actually left? There are still two real, unresolved contradictions in this case, and neither one has anything to do with that video at all. The first is Nolan's very last known conversation. One account, relayed through the family, says a young woman he was speaking with on the island told investigators Nolan said he intended to head back to the boat. A separate account from the friend group says Nolan told them the opposite, that he wanted to stay behind and keep talking to her. Both cannot be true. As of this recording, no official account has said which version holds. The second is the phone itself, not what's on it, but the sequence. If Nolan chose to stay behind expecting to catch a ride back later, why would he leave his phone with the group that was leaving? That's a specific, still unanswered question that has nothing to do with the disputed video, and it's the one piece of this puzzle Shepherd's correction doesn't touch at all. So here's the honest state of this case today, without embellishment. The Jackson County Sheriff's Office continues to classify this as a death investigation, not a homicide. Sheriff Ledbetter has said on more than one occasion that nothing found so far points to a crime, while also saying just as clearly that the investigation remains fully active, and that his office is still publicly asking for any original, unedited photos or video taken on Horn Island that day. 2 autopsies are still pending. The state medical examiner's toxicology results expected to take 2 to 3 weeks from the July 7th autopsy. And the independent examination the family commissioned in Washington, D.C. Funded in part by former NFL quarterback Colin Kaepernick, with filmmaker Tyler Perry separately covering funeral costs, delayed by canceled flights. With results still not publicly released as of this recording. There's also a layer to this story that deserves honest, careful treatment rather than either side's shorthand. Ocean Springs is a majority-white middle-to-upper-class community of roughly 19,000 people. By most public accounts and photos from that day, Nolan appears to have been the only, or one of very few, black teenagers among his friend group on that island. Reverend Al Sharpton, appearing publicly alongside the family, has been careful on this point. His actual position isn't that race definitely played a role. It's that nobody should rush to conclude it did, and nobody should rush to conclude it didn't either, because right now nobody actually knows. Representative Benny Thompson and the local NAACP chapter have both called for a transparent, timely investigation without prejudging its outcome. A GoFundMe for the family has passed $380,000. That number on its own tells you how far beyond Ocean Springs, Mississippi this story has traveled. What hasn't changed underneath every contradiction, every disputed video, every pending report is who was actually lost here. Not a case file, not a cluster of unresolved details. An 18-year-old wide receiver who, by the account of literally everyone who knew him, his coach, his teammates, his own parents, walked into rooms and made them lighter. A kid who was about to turn 19, who went out on a boat to celebrate a holiday with people he trusted and never came home, whatever the toxicology results say. Whatever the independent autopsy in Washington eventually finds. Whatever finally explains those 90 minutes on that beach. None of it changes the fact that underneath every headline in this story is a mother and father asking the most basic question a parent can ask. What happened to my son? And why? We'll be back the moment either autopsy is released or the moment investigators say anything new about those still unresolved 90 minutes. Subscribe now so you're here when that happens, and tell me in the comments what you made of Tracestin Shepherd's interview. Because I think it's about to change how a lot of people are talking about this case. We'll see you in the next update.